Welcome to the Collingwood Rant Elimination final episode. I'm Sly.
And I'm from the planet Bizarro. Spook.
Again.
We've done that one, have we?
I don't know. I think it's time we admit to our listeners that we perpetrated a Mission Impossible like caper where we faked some Brenton Sanderson and Nathan Buckley masks. We put them on our heads. We went over the border and we changed the way we played.
Mission Improbable.
So, Spook,
yes.
What did you think of that?
I think I've got about 8,000 apologies to make. I got to say, it's before we get into the nitty gritty of it all, that on the surface, and I'm tending to agree with what a lot of things that I've read, is that it was an epic win in all things considered.
All right, let's just backstep for a second before you go into the epic win. I should have asked you this earlier. Sorry. Let's look at the lead up to the match before we go to epic wins. Mm-hmm. So what's the first thing that happened in the lead up to the match? Ben Reid retired.
I was wondering where you're going with this. Yeah.
No, I'm curious about this. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but it was sold as he's retired and it's a selfless act. Why was it a selfless act? I mean, when other players retire, is it selfless?
It was effective immediately too, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, I actually heard on good authority that if he was fit, he was going to be selected.
Yeah, I can't see how that could possibly be true.
Well, geez, they did it last year, so they got form on it. They've done it about 9 times this year, and he's broken down about 9 times.
I think the key statement there was if he was fit.
Yeah, and that goes to the second point. So a lot of us were aghast that, the selections were Darcy Cameron. Like Chris Mayne came in, had some physicality, defensive pressure.
Yep.
And Darcy Cameron. So they went for the height. So I can see that they might have played Reid if he was fit. And everyone was aghast that we're going to play this extremely tall team that had 5 guys over 200 centimetres in it, and trying to make this forward line work with Cameron and Mason Cox up forward.
Yep.
But Cameron, in the end, he only had about 50% game time, and he really just came on mostly to go up against Nick Nat.
And confuse him.
So what do you think about that as a tactic?
It's I guess if my job was sweeping for mines and I didn't know where my next foot was going to land, that'd be a fair parallel. It was fraught with peril, but to his credit, I guess he made it work.
Well, Buckley has still come out again and said Grundy's not injured. So his form is just down.
Was he doing the Pinocchio nose gesture at the time?
Oh, yeah, it's like the flying high. And after the game, Buckley said they needed to bring in some help for Cameron. For Grundy.
What, you mean like a ruck coach?
Oh, like
during the game. Sorry. Yeah, okay.
During the game. So Buckley said they need to bring in some help, and then, they alluded to like he's had a strong or really heavy workload this year. And Buckley said, he's had a really heavy workload the last 4 years. I'm sitting there thinking, you do realize you're in charge of this club. If you wanted to lighten that workload, you could have done something about it a little bit earlier.
I can't believe he's training this hard again. I keep telling him not to do it.
Oh, look, I've let him ruck the entire game by himself.
He won't come off. He just doesn't stop rucking. He doesn't listen. He's like a 3-year-old.
Yeah, so I found that like staggering, that comment. It's like, I understand that when Witts was there and Grundy was there and they tried to share the workload, both of them did better when they carried the bulk of the workload.
Mm-hmm.
But, you go back to our premiership year in 2010, you had Darren Jolly as the ruckman, and then up forward you had Chris Dawes, Travis Cloak, and Lee Brown. And Lee Brown would provide the chop out for Jolly for, 5-6 minutes a quarter. And Buckley has bizarrely emulated that during his reign, going to, he lost Lee Brown immediately. He retired after 11. And then he had Dawes playing full forward, but also providing ruck relief, which I just found staggering because Dawes had only played about 30, 40 games to that stage. It seemed like a tremendous workload. He's brought in guys like Quinton Lynch. He's played Reid when he's fit. But he's never actually reproduced that structure that we had in the premiership year. but he's kept using that one of those talls in the forward line as a relief ruck, which is mostly Mason Cox. So for him to actually go to 3 talls was, like, if I was watching it thinking, geez, this is like a novel idea. It's been so long since we did it. It's actually smacks of innovation. I was actually really impressed. And the thing I liked was, look, Grundy, Nick Nat just blitzes Grundy. And I thought, okay, we could just go down that road again and watch Nick Nat blitz Grundy again and run Grundy into the ground. Or you could try something different. They try something different, so well done. I mean, it's probably the first different thing they've done since they played Brody Myercheck up forward in 2018.
Someone must have dropped a dictionary on the ground and it opened up to the age of innovation.
And it was fraught with danger. It could have just not come off. I mean, no one knows how much it's affected Nick Nat's performance. He's still blitzed. The one problem I really have with Grundy, and I've said this before, is he doesn't adapt to whatever's happening. He just keeps trying to do the same thing over and over. When he's playing Nick Nat, if I was Grundy, I would be coming in from the side. I would be coming in off 2 steps. I'd be coming in off 10 steps. I would just constantly keep changing it up. So Nick Nat is just thinking, what the hell's going on? The problem with Grundy in that regard, though, is I don't understand how he's played 150 games and he still mistimes his leap at times and jumps totally under the ball way too early. But, I'd like to actually see him tackle a challenge and go, okay, what I'm doing is not working. I need to approach this from a different perspective and do something to shake it up. And he just doesn't seem to do that.
So you're waiting for him to atone everything in the grand final this year?
Yeah, well, there's still 2 games before that. Midfield got killed.
There's a shock.
Yep.
Do you think an inside mid might have made a difference there?
Well, Levi Greenwood is great. No, last year I was saying, let's play him in the middle. I don't understand why he's not. If he's going to play on Kelly, why is he not on Kelly all the time? I still would have played Sire instead of Hoskin Elliott or Thomas, although Hoskin Elliott was okay. But I think that Sire, if he's fit, he's a must in that team, because that midfield, it is just so dysfunctional. It has no synergy in the way it works. And the way they waltz the ball out constantly, and I know sometimes Nick Nat's tap work was superb, but other times it was just defensively, we had no zone to pressure him when they won the ball. And surely going into a game like that, the midfield coach, I don't know who it is it Harvey or Sanderson or whoever, surely the midfield coach should have went strategizing to be defensive, because you would pretty much assume that Nick Nat's going to dominate the rucking. So you'd have to set up to accommodate that you're going to lose the taps. I mean, we won the actual hit outs, but in terms of hits to advantage, Nick Nat, what did he set up? What he set up about 5-6 goals.
Nick Nat,
yeah, just from the middle. Center clearances of 15 to 8 in their favour. Stoppage clearances we won 15 to 19, but we were usually light up stoppages around the ground. And the clearances in general were 30 to 27, but there was a lot of times their clearances were really
damaging.
But they're almost unimpeded. They're waltzing out, getting a kick straight up forward, and their forwards are taking a mark or bringing it to the ground, and then their crummers are doing damage.
I mean, what did they end up with? Was five goals direct from centre clearances. I mean, that'd have to be a almost a freak occurrence. Surely, you wouldn't get sides pulling that off too often.
No. The other thing too, which I should mention is, and this really frustrates me, I mean, why has it taken Buckley and coaching staff so long to revert to that fast, direct game style that drove them in 2018?
That was the marked difference in the end too. I think that, and then playing Coxie deep as well.
Well, I was going to get to that. So they played Cox deep, and they got the ball in quickly to him.
Yeah, but that was the 2 clear standouts. I mean, and right from the start of the game, it was clear that we weren't going to do that spinning backwards handball routine. They were going hard and direct, and it was, it was such a better team to watch.
And you remarked that our accuracy was uncharacteristic, but I think a lot of that came from the fact that when we were getting shots, we were getting them straight out in front and pretty close, Cox took 3 marks within about 25 meters. Cox is really accurate when he kicks, so he helped that. But we weren't getting those marks in the pockets or, snaps from congestion and shit like that. So it facilitated a much more efficient attack on goal. And I just don't understand why I mean, everyone's saying it now. We've been saying it since last year. Everyone's saying it now. They went to this chippy, sideways, triangle, going backwards bullshit. They look stagnant. They look really hideous the way they play the game. Last year, we kept commenting on the fact they played they'd come alive for 5 minutes to take the game on and they'd kick a few goals and they'd win. But the rest of their game style was just shit. And I don't know why it's taken them 2 years to turn around and go, well, that's not really working. I mean, it lost them a prelim, it lost them a top 4 spot this year. You go to that Richmond game, we kicked 5 goals in the first quarter. And he kicked, 1 for the rest of the game because we started chipping it around. It's like, what the fuck? How do you not look at productivity and say, well, that chippy shit is not working? Why has it taken 2 years?
Maybe this is Bucks' grand plan. For 2 years, he was just going to play rope-a-dope just for this moment. I mean, he must have known the pandemic was coming and everything was going to change. He's clearly switched on.
The thing with Buckley, I mean, someone else I was talking to echoed what you've been saying. It'd be great to get Luke Hodge in because every time you hear Luke Hodge talk, he just has such a great analytical breakdown of the game. But the thing, Buckley does that really well also. So your ability to interpret the game and articulate what's going on and your ability to actually implement a strategy that's going to work for you, they're two different things. It's commented to you, it's like the movie Amadeus, the way Salieri is portrayed in that. He can recognize genius, but he can't produce it himself. So I don't know why it's taken 2 years for the geniuses in the coaching box to actually sort of look at it and go, well, that chipping shit's not working, that tempo football's not working. It's like, my theory is because they lost the 2018 grand final, they walked away from that thinking we need to learn to control the tempo so we can slow it down when we're under fire. There's going to have to be times we're going to have to absorb their best. And instead of just counterattacking, let's just slow the game down, take the intensity out of their attack, and then we'll ramp back up. And it feels like, to me, that's what they've been trying to learn over the last 2 years. But instead, they've just tried to play tempo football, but it's been this asphyxiating brand, and they just suffocate and get pushed further and further back. And they did that a couple of times yesterday still, where they went backwards with kicks. Like long kicks, but didn't seem to have a plan B after they kicked it backwards. And that's what I think they actually tried to do. Whereas you look at Richmond just going, oh, fuck it, we're just going to play the chaos football and just run forward at all costs and attack and, create possibility from the anarchy. And that's worked for them. So I don't know why they, usually the Premier is the team everyone tries to emulate. So I don't know why Buckley and company weren't looking at Richmond just saying, that's what we should be doing rather than this tempo shit, which went out of style with fucking Paul Roos 14 years ago.
It can't be a brand if you're copying someone else, though.
I've said before, he's tried to hybridize in the past the Geelong and Hawthorn games. The Hawthorn chipping through traffic and the Geelong globe-trotting handballs. And they've tried to alternate as the game requires, but it becomes this, Ouroboros of the snake swallowing its own tail that, you're trying to handball and you're giving up ground, and then you just keep trying to handball to get out of it. You just keep giving up ground until you fall into a corner and you have no option but either to just lose the ball or kick the shit out of it randomly. And that's sort of what they were doing. They had no system to the way they attacked the game. And, it only took 35 games to work that out, that wasn't good for them. Oh, sorry, it wasn't 35 games because it's 2014, 2017 they were doing this. So it's like 110 games. Credit to Buckley. I should, as much as you attack him, I should give him credit also. The preparation for this game was insane with the quarantine and, staff and camper vans and shit like that. As I said before about Buckley, the really good thing is he doesn't make excuses. He doesn't sort of say, oh, yeah, it's been difficult or whatever. He just sort of sits down and says, well, this is what it is and we need to move forward and we're going to do our best. Regardless, I actually really appreciate that in the way he tackles any challenges. Whereas you compare him to some previous coaches and administrators, there's always that, we've talked about it before, there's always some excuse or there's always some qualification as to why they might fail. Go back to 202 Maguire going on about fucking Brisbane salary cap, I thought was just really insulating the players for failure. Anyway, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say it wasn't just only Bucks too. It's the fact that the whole club said nothing, and they've said nothing pretty much in any sort of negative light for the last couple of months around. There's inequities here and unfairness going on, but they haven't really whinged about it, which is clearly, I guess that's meant to be a solidarity move to galvanise everyone.
But I think that's really been Buckley. Driven by Buckley, because you go back to the 2018 grand final when they lost and he made his speech at the Copeland Trophy, he didn't blame the block on Maynard or all this or that. He just said we need to get better, and I thought that was great. It was, as I said, that's probably the best thing I've heard from a losing grand final coach at Collingwood. He didn't make excuses. It wasn't about this or that. It was just like, we need to be better. And that, puts all the players on notice. Don't think you lost this because of reasons. You lost this because you weren't good enough. You need to get better. I was lost where I was going to be. Dale Thomas on Twitter. Remember Dale Thomas?
Yes.
He said, big question to answer, but is that the greatest finals win of the modern era for Collingwood? Not a single person gave them hope. Isolation, caravans, hardest road trip in football, no side, you know how. The more you break it down, the better it is. Do you think it was the greatest finals win in Collingwood's modern history?
I don't know. I mean, you can look at a lot of them in isolation and say there were some exceptional ones there. I mean, the immediate one that springs to mind is the O2 qualifying final against Port Adelaide. Yeah, it was a similar sort of thing. You're travelling over there. You're the massive underdog. No one really expects you to win, especially you, and maybe me. Like, you're completely up against it. And you sort of always thought, probably back in that era, that the Collingwood sides tended to galvanise themselves quite well and respond quite well. With the way that we've been tracking this year, I didn't think we were going to do that. So there's that. There's the COVID thing as well. I mean, it really gives it a unique circumstance. But the way that they went over there and conducted themselves and executed the amendment of the game plan, considering the stodginess that they were coming from, I think, collectively, you've got to look at it as probably, as I said, it's one of the epic wins.
It is one of the epic wins.
Even towards the end, you expected something to go, against us. When they sort of came back and we were battling for about, probably it was a minute and 40 seconds. That seems to be the key thing with these two sides. And there's a point the difference. You kind of thought it'd actually be wrong if they lost this. Now they've done everything right. They've battled hard. It's almost a travesty to lose this, and they held on. And I've got to give them a little bit of
I got to give them a lot of credit,
admiration for the performance.
No, you got to give them a lot of credit. I got really actually annoyed with people posting, I'm just going to insult everyone, people posting what a gutsy win. It's like, well, why is it a gutsy win? They've totally changed the way they approach that game. We all thought they were going to get smashed. Kane Corns is getting mocked for saying Collingwood are just making up the numbers, but he said what the bulk of us were thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the way they were playing, on their strategy, they had no hope. And you get go to when we played Eagles earlier in the year, we killed them in the first quarter, playing fucking attacking fast football. And then we started chipping it around again. So for me, it wasn't a gutsy win. It was a smart win to change everything up. And you look at that first quarter when they kept getting the ball down to Cox, and credit to Cox for marking and for kicking accurately. He set up the win and he disheveled their defense. So they would have been a little bit Cox conscious after that, and which allowed guys like Myercheck and that to get free.
Mm-hmm.
And then they complained about the umpire. It's seriously, it's the amount of poor decisions for both sides. I thought it's evened out. You look at, I think one of the worst decisions, and there's a few, and I think they were in Collingwood, against Collingwood, not against bloody West Coast. I mean, Taylor Adams tackled a West Coast player and then got pinged for holding the ball himself because he held it 30 seconds earlier.
Gee, is that seriously the worst umpiring decision you've ever seen in your life?
Oh, it totally flabbergasted Adams.
It was when they showed it on the replay, and I think they showed it with a different camera angle, and you could see he was about 14 feet away from the ball. how the fuck did you get that wrong that badly? I mean, obviously the umpire's view was possibly blocked or.
I don't see how. I found no excuse for that one. I don't know fucking where he was. If it was blocked, then you shouldn't have made a decision. Adams got out of it and tackled the West Coast player, so you should have seen that Adams no longer had it. Interestingly, I think it was in the third quarter where Pendlebury was tackled in a similar way, and he just got the fuck out of the pack and held up his arms like, "Don't ping me, I don't have it any longer." So that really, I thought, impacted the way players approach tackles. That Josh Thomas mark, or should have been a mark. It wasn't paid a mark.
Yeah, I'm a little bit 50-50. I thought he controlled it long enough. But yeah, so you thought it was clearly a mark?
I thought it was a mark or a chop. So
yeah, I mean, the chop was probably more there than anything. I think probably he held it long enough. It was hard to sort of feel like it was that real borderline type one. But yeah, look, there was one that sort of struck me a little bit later that Ryan took the mark, and the arc of his arms came down, and he dropped the ball towards the end and it touched the ground a little bit, and he still sort of had retaining on it. And you think, well, really, by definition, that's not a mark. The ball's hit the deck.
Yeah.
But they paid that a mark. So, when you look at that and compare it back to the Thomas one, well, then definitely his should have been a mark. I think he controlled it long enough before the guy arrived late and either said chopped the arms or knocked it out. But I thought, it was borderline, but probably I would have paid it. He would have missed the goal at any rate.
The worst decision, and the Elliott being tackled and dropping it was up there, but it's not the worst. The worst decision was in the last few minutes when was it Roughhead who kicked it across to the pocket for Maynard to mark, and then Maynard tried a quick kick and got smothered. That's a fucking 50. The umpire hasn't called play on. So the West Coast Eagle player has no right to come forward and do that smother because he's got him right on Maynard's boot. So he hasn't actually pulled back onto the mark. That should be 50 metres, and they just played that on. That's why that 50-metre penalty is in there. So the guy on the mark can't actually reach in like that and stop the guy from kicking. The umpire hadn't called play on. He didn't call play on until after the smother. So that was, again, another appalling decision.
It's that ridiculous approach where, we're putting the whistle away. It's just farcical. If it's there, you pay it.
Oh, yeah. Well, fucking the only person who thinks you should put the whistle away is James Brayshaw. Thank you for that.
Could he put his tongue away somewhere?
Sorry?
Could he put his tongue away somewhere?
It's. I watched a few of the finals and he commentated. It was just painful. It was like, surely there's something better out there. Surely you could get Marcel Mousseau or someone to do the commentary.
Yeah, but I think that's seven. I mean, we'll go off on a tangent though if we cover this. But I think that's Seven's approach to try and make it moronically entertaining, and then have the special comments people actually give the insight into what's going on. The rest of them are just buffoons.
The Brayshaw, I just don't think is a good commentator. He states the obvious. He makes some really stupid quips, and then he provides insights like, I think umpires pay too much free kicks. It's like, well, they should be paying what's there. It's not capped. If there's 100, then you pay 100. It's not that there's too many. There's just a lot of incidents. So we've had a really, storied little history with West Coast over the last 3 years. We lost a big one, unfortunately.
What do we have? We've had about 8 finals or something against them. I think it's the highest amount in the modern area, which is obviously from about 1990 onwards. I think we've played them a fair bit. Same with them as John. It's like Pendlebury said after the game that he always seems to be either playing Geelong or West Coast in a final.
Well, Collingwood Geelong have played the most finals between each other.
That's
than any other
across
club.
The whole history.
Yeah, which is like strange. You would have thought it'd be with Carlton or Collingwood, Richmond or something like that. But it's Collingwood Geelong. And going back, you look at we played Geelong in the prelim in 80, a qualifying final, a prelim in 81. And then you go just recently, 210, 29, 27, they played them in prelims. 211, they played them in the grand final. And last year they played a qualifying final. So just in our recent history, we have played them quite a bit. Did you think, we weren't going to hold on to momentum or our attack or our audacity going through this game?
Um,
So the first quarter, they kicked
sorry,
1-2 to 4 straight. So just to set the scene. So first quarter really came out hard, but like I was sitting there thinking, we did this when we played them previously.
Yeah, well, that was my first thought. Again, like with the scoreline, you're starting to nudge that 2018 grand final territory, and how they were going to respond past that frenetic first quarter was going to be the interesting part, whether they could sustain it or whether they revert to form. More so to the point.
And Adam Simpson made reference to that right side being the scoring end. So come the second quarter, West Coast kicked 4-2 to our 2-1. So it did start to look like, okay, they are wrestling away the ascendancy, and this could be like even like the qualifying final in 2018 where, we really battled away to get a little bit of a lead, but then they just got on top of us and we couldn't rein them back in. I don't think anyone was particularly brilliant in the midfield, and no players got possessions. For Josh Dacos started really well. There was a few guys there who got a lot of numbers, but I just didn't actually see him. I sort of had those games where I'm thinking, okay, I can see you've got him this many possessions, but I haven't seen him with my own eyes. And then the third quarter was sort of back to like, I don't know if you call it, we were dominating. We kicked the 3-3 to their 2-2. And it was in that third quarter also where Trelaw missed that relatively easy snap.
Yeah.
He crumbed the ball about 15 metres out. He had plenty of time. He could have even straightened him, but he snapped and kicked the point. And I'm actually going to criticise Adam Trelaw here because he did that. And then in the last quarter, the last quarter I thought, okay, they're going to run over the top of us because they got the lead and it looked really, really scary. And then, we finally did that final attack in about the last 2 minutes, and Trelaw ran towards, he got free and he was running inside 50, and then he just sort of booted it randomly, and it bounced up and McGovern roved it and then launched their counter-attack. And that's exactly what happened in the 2018 grand final. I would have hoped that Trelaw, he sort of had a bit of time to actually either take the game on or to look a little bit closer at what he was going to do, but he just sort of booted for distance, but he booted it straight to McGovern, which I thought, and that really annoyed me. Darcy Moore did that with a few kickouts where he just kicked them straight to wherever Nick Nat was standing. It's like, can we get away from the dominant tall man on the field? Can someone provide a lead maybe on the other side of the field and we can kick to them instead? But going in that last quarter, when Trelaw kicked it long and then McGovern crumbed it and then launched their counter attack, I seriously thought if they win again from this position, that will just break me. But it's going to break the club. You might as well just trade everyone out and start again, because there's no way that they would recover from a second loss in the last 2 minutes from a counter attack like that.
Yeah, look, I remember thinking at the time that I was more grateful that bounce, because this is the one that you're referring to, where it's sailed across the goal face and it was looking like it was going to go through for a point. Yeah,
it sort of held up. Yeah,
and I thought that actually probably in hindsight worked better for us because we were already sort of set up for the counter down the field. So, and they hadn't sort of set up any particular zones; they were just doing that frantic clearing out. And if you can imagine if that went through for behind, there's every chance that they would have set up their zone and we would have done ours, and then they would have kicked on it and then probably had one of those epic sprints to goal, and then we'd lose. This way, I thought, we at least had the troops upfield that started to meet them head on, and I felt a little bit more comfortable with the outcome of that. I was still shitting bricks, but I think, if it had gone the other way and had gone through, we'd be probably having a different discussion now.
Oh, but I'm just saying, if they won, however they produced the counter-attack, whether it was McGovern roving it or if it had gone through for a point and they launched a counter-attack, if we'd lost that last 2 minutes with them propelling the ball from one end of the ground to the other, that would have just fucking broken.
It'd be soul-destroying. I mean, I'm hands up who was expecting that to happen to a point.
No, well, it was great. I mean, Adams produced an awesome smother in the centre there, and Chris produced an awesome throw to clear it. And, they're all complaining about the throw, and it's like, oh, well, geez, I guess when there's a fucking indiscretion in the last 2 minutes,
Yeah,
You only complain about it when it doesn't go for you.
I think they've got the greatest story of all time there, and I'd be shutting up.
Oh, geez. It killed me that McGovern stepped over the line was called deliberate in the first quarter. And I've seen that happen to about 5 Collingwood players. I think it actually happened to Pendlebury earlier this year too. And then any time any Collingwood player was like, went over the line, it was like booed. And I'm just sort of sitting there thinking, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but if you're thinking these situations are all the same, and even Matthew Richardson was saying, McGovern was under no pressure when he stepped over. He just stepped over. He should have waited until he was tackled and let it ride him over. They just found that ironic that, but then again, it's the West Coast fans complaining about the hometown umpiring, which, they obviously thought they'd been robbed. Who are your heroes of this game? Josh Dacos?
The one thing I wanted to say about Josh Dacos is, I think I made the comment to you, or I could have made it to another group of friends, that he really gave me Daisy vibes about the way that he just looks like he's born to play finals. He and that, like, he didn't do anything particularly breaking or anything at this stage. It's his first final, but he just absorbed the pressure so well and played so effectively. I think, it would be easy in a big stage like that, in your first final, to sort of disappear into your shell. But he just doesn't seem like that's an option for him, which is, again, a part of his development. Seriously promising sides. If you can be a great home and away season player and a fucking brilliant finals player, geez, who's going to stop you?
Well, I think I said it earlier this year, but he reminds me a lot of Gary Ablett Jr. in terms of his development. He started as this a little bit bland, I guess, and then you started seeing glimpses of things, and this season is really, evolved. I mean, I said this before too. I don't think it was handled very fairly last year. He just seemed to be dropped the moment he had a quietish game, and I don't mind if that's going to be your policy, but then you look at the way they've treated guys like Callum Brown, who've been struggling consistently, Josh Thomas and Tom Phillips, and even Hoskin Elliott. Buckley's persevered with them regularly, but Dacos just found his way out constantly. And there was an article written about Dacos where they said that he was told, maybe, your future lies elsewhere. And I'm thinking, if you were seriously going to trade him out or delist him, whatever the case, you really need to look at the cultivation of him as a young player, because I don't think it was actually very fair in the way he was handled. And people might say, he didn't really produce anything worthwhile. But I think last year he had a lot of really good first halves, and then he tended to fade out, which is not unusual for a young player with limited endurance. But yeah, I just don't think it was handled very well. I'm so overjoyed that this season he's taken his opportunity and he's consistently produced, week in, week out. And he's when the game's on the line, he's kicked some really good goals. Not just like fucking over the tops or anything. He's produced some really nice snaps and that sort of thing. Taylor Adams really scrapped well for the ball, but geez, they need someone else in there to help him with that ferocity in attack.
You mean like Sire?
Yeah. Or even Greenwood, there's abdicated Greenwood going into the centre last year. I mean, I'll go on to Greenwood. Fuck, I love his audacity. He doesn't have, any of the, I don't know what you call it, like the superstar assets. Like, he's not, extremely fast or doesn't have amazing X factor or anything. But when he gets the ball, it's like, fuck it, I'm going. I wish Chris Mayne showed more of that too, where he's in the pack and he'll go, I'm going to run around a few people here. Reminds me of actually Dennis Banks in a way.
The amazing thing with him too is he's come off an ACL. The way that he was busting tackles was incredible. And how old's Greenwood?
He's about 30, I guess. I'll look him up.
He's he just seems really sort of strong around the hips, and he was breaking all sorts of things, and just the attack and the
31.
The endeavour to get that ball forward was just unflappable.
And actually, we commented on this too when we were watching the game at a house party. But early on,
didn't we fly over for the game?
Yes, we did that too in a private Cessna.
Yeah. I think we quarantined for 14 minutes. That was enough, isn't it?
And I've always said this, we've always said this. Chris Mayne, awesome defensive side, awesome physicality, but whenever he gets the ball, it's that little sideways handball, little sideways kick, except early in the first quarter where he drove on long, and that I thought showed the intent of them to try and move the ball forward at all costs. But I wish, as I said, I wish Chris Mayne did more of what Greenwood does, because Green, in terms of their makeup, they're very similar types of players. Neither of them extremely quick or anything. They're both physical. They can be both dour, but Greenwood plays with some flair and Mayne plays the other way. Jordan De Goey didn't really do much except 2 goals he kicked when he chose to kick them.
He's that snap, though. That was just something. That was incredible.
It was, and it's very reminiscent of last year when we beat him by 1 point over there. He kicked I think it was the sealer. He produced something out of nothing, which just shows that if we can get this guy fit and build his tank, he could be a seriously amazing midfielder. Elliott had a sort of like an up and down game, I guess you'd call it. I'm getting a little bit agnostic on just having so many smallish players in the side, though. Hoskin Elliott, he did a couple of nice things. He really hasn't recaptured that 2018 form, though.
No, he seems to go. Well, I mean, I guess like you were saying earlier, there were certain players whose numbers were okay, but you didn't notice them, and I didn't notice him a lot. He missed that grubber goal, but he made up for it a little bit later. It's not that long later, but other than that, I'm not really recalling too much. But again, some of those, and this is probably what you want from those bottom tier players. They're all contributing. They're all doing that team thing. So, it's hard to sort of say that, even though you didn't see them, they were still out there and they were functioning.
How about Braden Maynard?
That was a great battle between him and Ryan. I think Ryan lowered his colours a little bit, but I wouldn't be too upset with that. Ryan's an absolute gun. He's just an incredible footballer to watch. And it's not just, he was just everywhere. And any time the ball was going somewhere and someone had to stand up for West Coast, it just always seemed to be him. You pull him out of that side collapses.
He's got an amazing array of weapons. It's not it's not that he's just quick or he's got X factor. He's got a great mark. He's got a great leap. He's got great endurance. He's seriously, you're looking at a guy I think could easily sit in the elite of the AFL next year.
Oh, definitely.
And anytime the ball went anywhere near him, I just was thinking, oh, geez, I'm waiting for this guy to do so. Though with Toby Green, when Maynard lowered his colours to green, I was thinking this is probably something they should move. I don't know who you'd go to, but maybe it'd be better just to move Maynard further upfield and use him more as a weapon with his long kicking and get someone else on Ryan to see if they can curb his influence, because Ryan was just so damaging.
At both ends too. It's just incredible. Yeah. Anyway. Mayo, you going to talk about Mayo?
Nah, screw him. Chris Mayne?
We covered him, didn't we?
Did we? Oh, we sort of covered him in relation to Levi Greenwood.
Look, I think...
They got 18 possessions, which is pretty high return for Mayne.
As you said before, apart from some of those annoying little handballs that put the receiver under more pressure than he was under, I thought he was really good. If you can get back to that finals form of 18, bloody keep going, mate.
Well, you'd think, and we'll talk about this in some later episode, but you'd think that there's going to be a couple of forced retirements. I mean, Reed's already gone. Varco, I found it very interesting that Cameron Ling said, oh, he's retired, hasn't he? And then he backtracked because he realised, oh, no, no one said that. So I'm just wondering if Varco's actually told Ling, I'm finishing up, because, they were extra long teammates. You'd imagine they might still speak. Jaden Stevenson.
Much improved. He obviously didn't get anything on the scoreboard, but some of his work around the ground was good. There was that really crucial spoil in defence. He just seemed to come out of nowhere and would have been a certain goal saver. And I was pleased with his effort. Way better than he's been for a while.
Well, I would. It was pretty good. Only had the 10 disposals, but if you look at the stat of meters gained, he's up there in the best with 357 meters. Trelaw's on 400. Taylor Adams is on 374. And then you have a couple of guys on 300 in. I'm surprised that the Goey's there, so I don't know how the hell they work out that stat. But anyway, going to Joe Stenson shows how much he actually covered the ground. I'd just be worried if he's still carrying glandular or something, how much an effort like that would take out of him.
Well, especially with the route that we've got moving forward, that if they're going to be serious and do something, this is going to be a solid 3 weeks of football coming up.
And I know that you tried to take the 24 off your jumper earlier this year, only to realize that it's dyed into the fabric. But
it's tattooed on my back.
Josh Thomas, should he still be getting a game? He did that one really nice handball to my check, but
what was his? Yeah, that Mio goal was just ridiculous. Was there? I haven't looked at the stats. Score involvement.
So he had 5 kicks and 4 handballs. I imagine that was the only real score involvement he had. Goal assist just the one, so that's the 80 meters game. But I mean, he's playing in the pocket, so he's not really going to dominate in terms of meterage. But he's been in a conundrum this year in the terms of how far he's dropped off. I understand some of it's because of the way we move the ball forward and we're just really slaughtering small forwards. But he would seem at the top of the pile if you're saying we're going to have to bring someone else in.
Oh, yeah. In that particular team from Saturday night, definitely, yes. He'd be the one that would be hanging on by a thread. But he gets value, I think, from the coaching panel somehow, and they're more than likely just going to stick with him.
Well, I imagine that he's meant to be in there playing sort of a defensive role, but I'm looking at his stats.
Defensive or offensive?
Oh,
seems to be offending a lot of people.
Well, it was. You look at this game; it wasn't like one of those games where there was heaps of tackles or anything like that. But Jack Crisp 8 tackles. I thought Crisp had a really mixed game. There was some possessions he murdered, and there was other stuff he did that was great, which tends to be pretty much who he is.
He improved dramatically after you shit-canned him in the first quarter.
I don't know. Dramatic might be a little bit of a dramatic word. Levi Greenwood, 8 tackles, and Taylor Adams, 8 tackles. So they got the bulk of tackles, and everyone else got like little frees and ones and stuff like that. So, you look at Stevenson didn't get a tackle. Josh Thomas didn't get a tackle. Trelaw only had the 1. Darcy Moore had 0. Braden Maynard had 0, surprisingly. And then you had guys like the Goey and that who only had the 1 and all that. So it wasn't really a defensive game in terms of frenetic tackling and all that sort of stuff. But looking at Thomas, you'd think he's not going to hit in the score, but he needs to be applying defensive pressure, and he's certainly not doing that to any great extent. Like you'd have to say that, I don't know who's leading the league in tackles inside forward 50, but I'll just compare him to Tip and Woody from Essendon, who does that role manically and does it so well. Thomas is nowhere near anything like that.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
We'll talk about that more looking at next week's match. And then I'll finally go to Brody Mychek. How good was his post-game interview? Did you see it?
I saw snippets of it. I switched over because I was on Foxtel. I switched over and caught just the tail end. So I haven't seen a replay of that. What did he say? Give me the highlights.
Because he won the television for, whatever award they give out. And he was just talking about and he was just talking about how he was going to buy a new television, and he was telling his partner he was just going to save his best game for the final. And then they asked him about that goal, and they go, there's a bit of a luck involved in that goal, wasn't there? And he goes, it was all luck. So he kicked 2 vital goals in that last quarter. That left foot running banana floater was, I don't know. I think there was an element of he was just trying to put it to the top of the square, and
he's miskicked it. And that's just gone through brilliantly. I mean, they had so much, even as it sailed through, it still had momentum on it. He really gave it a good whack.
Yeah.
I think when it came off the boot, it just looked like if that dribbles 20 meters, it's probably a good result, but it just kept going. It was amazing.
Too.
I know. That's a real thing you can't do, to be honest. I think
Oh, then a little.
you did text that he's clearly gone past Franklin.
I've gone past Franklin. Ben
The
Reed's gone
best of
past
Franklin,
Franklin.
I mean, not Franklin now.
Okay. You're talking about Benjamin Franklin, who's a
Yeah.
fly kites. And then he took that really nice mark running back with the flight a few minutes later, and he snagged the goal on the right footer snap. Never looked in doubt. Of course, at Collingwood, you're always worried when anyone's kicking a goal. That last quarter was probably as monumental a finals performance as you'd see from a player to drag his team over the line. And, this is a guy who struggled this year. Again, going back to part of that's due to system, the way we've used the forwards, the way we've moved the ball forward. But he obviously relished Coxie taking a lot of the pressure. McGovern got the better of Mychek earlier, but later on, Mychek, that last quarter was brilliant. And then he went round down into defence and he took a vital mark. You talk about Liam Ryan. How good's Brody Mychek?
Oh, that's it. I mean, I think in the future you'll be uttering the two in the same breath.
I think he'd be just uttering Mychek's name. Yeah, just hypothetically, if there was a draft now, where would he go? What number?
Oh, aside from number one.
Yeah.
He'd have to be early second round, you would think.
Yeah, I would have said about 20 to 30. Yeah. I mean, he reminds me a little bit of Tim Membry. I think Membry only about 20, although that draft was one of the compromised ones. But, is that sort of flankerish size, running forward. Mychek and Coxie, they like West Coast for some reason. They do well against West Coast. But, when you needed someone to stand up, and the thing too, which disappointed me, going back to the free kicks, Cox was just impinged and held onto and blocked after that first quarter, and the umpires did nothing about it, which emboldened the West Coast players to continue doing it. You can see a few times he turned around to the umpires going, I was blocked, and they just did nothing about it, which really frustrated me. But he seems to, or they both seem to really enjoy playing West Coast, as Kennedy and Darling seem to enjoy playing us.
Yeah, what did Darling only ended up with the one though, didn't he?
Well, I'll tell you in a minute.
I mean, Kennedy's he's a hard man to stop the best at times, and Ruffy, he probably had a bit of a shocker in some of that respect. Moore was mainly on Darling. I don't think it was Moore's best game.
No, I thought he was I don't know what's the best way to put it.
Average.
He struggled. He struggled. Sort of didn't really provide much marking, and neither did he provide a lot of those mad dashes out of the back. So that Oscar Allen got 2. Jack Darling.
Is he the 10-year-old that's playing for him?
No, I think that was that. What's his name? That Jackson Nelson? I don't know. So Jack Darling only kicked the free 2, so I don't know what game you were watching. And Kennedy kicked 3 goals 4, so I don't know what game you were watching. And,
I don't know. I pumped up Kenny. I just couldn't remember what Darling's number was. I don't know what one.
No, I think the 10-year-old was. I think it's that Jack Petrocelli. Remember, he used to have a TV show in the 70s.
That's right, with a parrot.
Was a parrot in Petro?
Or was it Beretta?
It was a parrot. Any last thoughts about this win?
No, I said it was suitably epic. I mean, there was probably about 7 or 8 lead changes probably in the game. It was just like
changes, yeah.
Just reminded me of the first Rocky film where there's every chance you were going to be down on the ground and on the ropes, but they just kept coming back and swinging, and both sides did. It was look, there was some good finals, considering that the quality of football this year has been subpar.
All 4 finals are pretty good. I mean, the media has remarked on that too. They're all great finals, given usually have 1 or 2 duds in there, but they all pretty much went down to the wire. I mean, the Bulldogs and Kilda one sort of. It was the last few minutes that really.
Saints tried to pull out the big choke on that one.
It's like the 1989 grand final. A lot of people remark about what a great grand final it was. In terms of the match, it's a shit match. I mean, Hawthorn was up pretty much the whole game, and Geelong had this late surge, but they never, ever were close. The margin's 5 points, but, I think Geelong got their last goal with about 30 seconds left. So they really had no hope they were going to win it. So I can't remember why I brought that up. I know in terms of the finals and all that, the Bulldogs and Kilda one, St Kilda were up for they looked like they had it pretty comfortable, but then they choked in the last about 5 to 7 minutes, and Bulldogs came hard at them and made it a really interesting game. But yeah, they're all pretty good finals. So
I mean, you how did you go with the last quarter? You because you've obviously been ambivalent for the whole year, and you completely shut them out of your life as of Tuesday last week. Did you get invested in the last quarter?
It wasn't Tuesday last week. It was Tuesday last January. No, look, it was a great win. I'm really proud of them. I'm really, I got to give, because I've criticised Buckley and the coaching staff, I got to give them credit for innovating, for going back to that game style, and I've always given Buckley credit because I do believe he's the most un-Collingwood coach we've had in terms of the way he views the club. He doesn't buy into that hype and doesn't buy into excuses. He's very results driven, and he's constantly resetting the bar. So in that regard, I think he's great. But look, you know what? Great win, but I don't give a fuck because you still got, if you want to win the flag, there's still 3 games to go. So, as great a win as it is, and people were comparing it to other games, and Ed from the West made a good comment I saw on Facebook, which I totally agree with. And people were bringing out other similar wins, like the 2007 win against West Coast in extra time. And it's like, it was a good win, but it didn't lead to anything because we lost in the prelim.
No, and
I was going
to say a few of my friends were talking today on messages, obviously, because we're not allowed to look at each other anymore. About some of the other great.
Friends, that's a good thing.
Some of the other great finals wins, and you're sitting there thinking, they're all fantastic wins, but fucking none of them led anywhere. They ended up either in grand final losses or that one moment was the one moment for the final season. Stuff like this, you've really got to want to make it count. You can't just have this spirited performance in the elimination final and then not turn up the following week. If you show that and you want to convince us that you think you can win the flag this year, you've got to go hard and keep doing this.
And I 100% agree with that. Years ago, back in the days of VHS, my brother used to record games from the seasons from like the 80s and
the winners.
And Sevens Big League and shit and all that. And I remember going through some of the games again, and the only ones I could really enjoy were the 1990 games because I knew that season was going somewhere. There are great. I remember in '81 beating Carlton by 1 point at Victoria Park. I remember beating them by 9 goals at Princess Park, and Dacos kicking 7 on Bruce Stall. They're fucking great wins, but ultimately that season went nowhere. And in the end, we're going to look at this, and it's going to be qualified and contextualized by where this season ends. If they were to win an improbable flag, you'd be going, fuck, brilliant, and go sign up everyone for 100 years. But if they were just to lose the next 2 weeks or next week, or even if they got to the grand final and lost it, I don't want to get to a fucking grand final and people go, well, it was a great effort to do it given all the circumstances. I don't give a fuck. I've done that. It's about winning. That's all it's about. That's all football is about. Because in the end, when you look at the history books, they don't talk about great finals or any great seasons or fucking great medical centers built for $67 million or profits or merchandise or memberships or supporters or any of that. In the end, we remember clubs only for their flags and their accomplishment. And you could talk about Collingwood's four-peat of 1927 and 1930. No one can tell you anything else about those seasons. All we know is the Premier. So great win, but hey, there's still 3 weeks to go. So in answering your question, I thought, great win, really admiration and credit, praise to Buckley and co and the players. But this is just the beginning, and I don't want this to be yet another season of so close so far, but let's clap them on the back because, hey, we had a great win. You go back to the Bulldogs in 2016, they had 4 great wins, and they're remembered for that. And Collingwood, you want to fucking make history, go do it also.
Agree.
Looking at the game coming up against Geelong, yet another final against Geelong. Any changes you'd make? So as far as we know, no one's injured.
So say that again.
As far as we know, nobody's injured.
I just like hearing the sound of it.
As far as we know. I mean, Howe's not going to make it back. They can't get side bottom through quarantine unless they build the time machine. So he's not going to return. So those two guys are definitely out for the season. Tom Phillips should be fit.
Yeah, well, I think that's really when it comes down to positioning, it's really Phillips and Thomas that are the ins and outs, surely, as a possibility.
Would you stay with the Darcy Cameron with the extra ruckman?
Oh, well, it'd be hard to drop him, wouldn't it?
Yeah, to drop him, but I'd be really worried about sticking with him when it's not needed for this game, and then you end up being slow and too top heavy. Look, the guy, if he's fit, okay, we don't know anything about what's going on with the reserves or the players held in reserve.
Even if there is still a reserve run around.
Yeah, and obviously a horrible year for development for the young guys like Bianco and Rantel and all that sort of shit, which is obviously going to be across the board. But the guy, if he's fit, who I'd bring in would be Braden Sire. And I really think he's so important to that midfield still. And I'd rather play Sire in the middle and then rotate him out to half forward where Josh Thomas would be than persevere with Thomas, because I think Thomas has been given plenty of chances and he's not producing anything you can't replace up forward with somebody who's going to come in and flounder. And meanwhile, Sire could potentially be a huge injection of grunt and architecture for that midfield. So it starts to function a lot better because it really... And I'd be really tempted to even consider Wheels simply for his defensive pressure in the middle, because the way West Coast waltzed that out. But if he's fit, I'd definitely be going with Sire.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, Phillips can play a similar role to Thomas. They'll probably, except Phillips is probably standing a better chance of snagging a goal or two. But then, you never know. Thomas can do the same.
Well,
but yeah,
I mean, Phillips, if he's still at Collingwood next year, do we persevere with him right now, or do we go with someone who we want to be investment in our future also? I mean, the Rusco's the other one too. I'd consider instead of. And Rusco, with a kick, I think he about 5 goals in his 3 games, which is not a bad return. No, so, what's Thomas done? Thomas has kicked his 4 goals for 15 games. So, Rusco or Sire, obviously all the other guys, Scharenberg and that, are not in consideration anymore.
No, clearly.
The really big question mark hangs over Grundy. I thought it opened up a lot of interesting questions that Buckley relegated into the bench during some really important times. And I understand why he did it at the beginning of quarters. I mean, I think I said they should do that with Cox, just wear out Nick Nat a little bit and then bring Grundy on. He had a great tackle there. I think it was on Darling or Kennedy late in the game, but he really struggles.
He took a couple of handy contested grabs in the last quarter as well. I think he started to lift when the game intensity was demanding that he lift. So, look, I took that as a positive sign. With him at the moment, you take a lot of things like that as an extremely positive because you want him to get back to his best. But I don't think he'd be anywhere on the radar to be dropped. Is that what you were saying?
No, not dropping Grundy.
No.
No, definitely wouldn't drop him.
No.
I just actually found it really interesting. I mean, Buckley's saying it's a form thing. I just can't see how he'd be that drastically out of form. He struggles to cover the ground. He's very easily manhandled. He doesn't seem the one to kick at times. There's a few times you look at him, he's just really struggling. It's like that Anthony Rocker hands on hips look that he doesn't seem to have endurance or second effort. So I'm be really surprised. He doesn't have his leap anymore either. I'd be really surprised if come the off season we don't find out he had groin or something like
Yeah,
that.
I was thinking osteo the other day, actually.
And you've seen the way that, it can level tall players. I mean, look at Joe Danaher. But Buckley keeps insisting it's not an injury thing, which I find real. If there was something, because in the past, if you hear footballers and they talk about injuries, they end up sort of going to that defense of, oh, well, when you play football, in the end, you're always carrying some niggle or other. It's just how much it impacts you. But they haven't even given Grundy that excuse. So I find it interesting that in that last minute of the game, when went back to the centre, Buckley opted for Cameron rather than Grundy. So some of that might just be rotations that they couldn't get Grundy back on in time, but he looked pretty disconsolate on the bench there. And to me, it didn't look like it was a message Buckley was sending any more than saying, look, it wasn't a message Buckley was saying as in your efforts aren't good enough. It was more like, look, obviously you're not quite right at the moment, so this is the way it's going to have to be. And that selecting Cameron, was that a necessity thing because they just didn't think Grundy can run out 100% of the game?
Oh, Jesus. You wouldn't have thought he would have been rested at some point this year. Is it a surprise that it's come to this?
Well, I'd be really annoyed too. I mean, looking at it from a practical standpoint, you sign him to 7 years and then you run him into the ground. It's like, okay, I've got 6 more years of this because you've killed him and you haven't supported him ably. And, I really would have thought that, and they probably, which is an insane thing, but they probably kept thinking Reed was going to come good at 30 and with all his
pinch
soft
hit
tissue.
in the ruck as well.
Yeah, because he had played in the ruck a few times, last year and that. So they probably thought Reed was going to fill that role, but really they should have earmarked, anyone to come into the club. I mean, they got Lee Brown 11 years ago with pick 70 or something. Surely there are options they could have explored there to bring in and play that role. I mean, if you look at Lee Brown statistically, he wasn't having huge influences on most games. There's a few games where he kicked, I remember he kicked 3 in a quarter against the Bulldogs, and he'd kick his odd goal here and there. But, what they really wanted to do was hold down the position in the forward 50 structurally, and then to move into the ruck and give Jolly, 5-minute break, and then either to sit on the bench for a bit or to go back in the forward line. And surely we could have looked for someone who could be that player and whose body you could trust. I mean, the Reed thing, if that was seriously what they expected with Reed, which I actually believe they did, because they have such a great track record medically and with rehabilitation. I just think it's madness. I mean, Reed should have, I think, been delisted 2 years ago, but they gave him another year. Seems to suggest that they thought, well, he's almost right. We got him out we were playing like about 5 games last year, and he probably broke down in 3 of them. So I don't know. I just wish that they looked at that position a couple of years ago, someone to play that Lee Brown role and to give Grundy the respite he needed. If they've run him into the ground to that extent, geez, that would be really worrying. And because you look at that Joe Danaher and how spotted his last, 3-4 years are, and the way he's been brought down. I mean, it looks great when he can get out there, but he's not getting out there that much. I'd be really worried. So he played 8 games last year, Ben Reed. So they must have thought, hey,
he's coming back.
It's only a 17-game season. He only has to double that output now.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, but so, and just looking at Joe Danaher by comparison, since 2017, he played 23 games, but in 18, he played 7. Last year, he played 4, and this year, he played 4. So, you look at how much he's been hurt by that, and at his size and age, you also have to worry, well, geez, you might get him back out there, but is he going to be the same guy? Anyway, so would you make any changes?
No, apart from the couple you alluded to. I almost think we'll go in unchanged. Yeah, probably more likely. I mean, really, on merit, apart from Thomas, there's not too many you could swing the axe at.
I could try.
Unless it, anyway. Yep, go on.
No, Thomas would be the leading. Thomas would be up there, and then Hoskin Elliott would be another one. But I think Hoskin Elliott is the sort of guy, when you put him in a good team, he will actually produce a bit because he needs to be fed. He needs that opportunity. He's not going to be a grunt man who runs into a pack and wins the ball. I mean, he's only 56 kilos still, isn't he? And he does have that X factor, which, we sorely lack.
Hmm.
Selwood, well, he injured a finger. He's had surgery, but they say he will play. But and they had a couple of guys like Ablett and that they brought back who really struggled.
Yeah.
So it's question, will they be better the second week back, or has Scott brought back some guys that have just ruined Geelong's momentum the way Malthouse did with Collingwood in 2009?
Well, they are, aren't they about the oldest side running around at the moment? I mean, they're a top-up specialists. But look, I mean, I think ultimately when we won on Saturday night, this would virtually have been the Cats' worst nightmare. This is a side that plays well against them, and this is a side that if it plays well again, it's going to put them out in straight sets, which is everything that they'd be shitting themselves about. I mean, they're going to come out hard. They don't want to lose another final. But, we do play well against them. So, I'm feeling a bit more confident about this week than I had no confidence last week. So, but against them, I'd be feeling a little bit more confident. But they have a lot to play for as well. So it's not going to be an easy game. I hope I'm wrong, but I think it'll be another bruiser.
Yeah, my concern about going back to Queensland too is just adjusting to those dewy conditions. We saw that they played with balls dipped in soap, or they trained with balls dipped in soap, and that really helped not at all a few weeks ago. But just the change of climate, you're right, like with Geelong, they just really got a lot of pressure on them. I don't know why. Maybe, people say that they get into the finals or they play Shell Stadium, whatever the hell it's called, Skilled Stadium. We'll say Grand, I don't know. Cardinia Park, they play that really well, and then they struggle to translate that across to other grounds, but they were doing really well for a time this year. So don't know why they're not standing up in finals, but, Hawkins kicked in accurately last week. You don't think that those players they brought back are going to be as bad, so they've got a lot to play for. It's just a question of what are we going to play the same game style, because Chris Scott would surely be expecting we're going to take the game on like maniacs again, and will Buckley roll the dice and go, well, this is the way we need to play, or is he going to look at it and say, hey?
I think it'll be a dour, low-scoring affair.
Well, the last time I think we only kicked like 8 goals for the game, and Goey got 5 of them. So I actually hope that we play exactly the same way. So last time we only kicked 8-9. And as I said, Goey kicked 5 goals, 1. So you only had 3 other goal kickers in Taylor Adams, Josh Dacos, and Will Hoskin-Elliott. I actually hope we play the way we played against the West Coast. We just take the game on, because I actually think we could just crush them and not crush them, but win relatively comfortably. Although with Collingwood, I'm never comfortable.
No. But so I'm feeling a little bit more confident against the Cats, to the point where I might even tip us to win. But we've been pretty negative, allegedly, for a while. So Cats by 48 points.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
Yes, that line was bandied about a fair bit.
I'm tipping Collingwood by minus 37 points, because that's what I did last week. So now I'm on a streak to reproduce. The superstitions are in.
Look, if they do what they did on Saturday,
win.
Yeah. Well, that sums it up, really. We could have a really good discussion next week. But if they revert to the last 2 years and then this game is an aberration, I'll be very pissed off.
Well, I think...
this game being Saturday's game as the aberration.
Yeah. Well, I think while there are still the blind followers, I guess I'll call them, a lot of public sentiment amongst the Collingwood faithful has shifted to attitudes that you've been espousing for
100 years.
Yeah, that we're just not there, and we should take a step back to step forward. So now Collingwood's at these weird crossroads of, hey, can we produce this and prove idiots specifically like you, exclusively like you, wrong? Or are we just going to produce a shit performance and entirely endorse what you're saying and that we're not quite good enough and, that we need to go back? I mean, the one thing is I don't think we're a brilliant team, but I don't think it's a brilliant competition anymore. So
that's the clincher at the end of the day. And as I said, you didn't see any imbalance in the finals over this week. They were all, as you said before, all pretty good. So it sort of shows where the evenness is. As much as you had sides that you particularly look like they're going to be standouts during the year, they all got pegged back. Who would have thought Richmond would have lost on the other night? As enjoyable as that was. All manner of things can happen from here. And I guess, the simple thing is whether you've said things during the season or you think the club should head in a direction X and they want to travel Y, it's all irrelevant now. You're here, you've demonstrated a very good performance. Don't fucking stop. Give it a crack.
The other thing too, I'll hate losing because I hate losing anything, but I'll hate losing. But if they play the way they played on Saturday night and they lose, I'll go, okay, well, you know what? They fucking played a nice brand of football and they just fell short or whatever. Even if we lost comfortably, but I could see that, we're trying to get that going. If they lose playing that dreary, backward, short, triangular bullshit, then I will be advocating next week that we need to fire everyone from the top down and just start again because that's not going to get us anywhere.
No, that's exactly right, and that's it. It's that fine line. I mean, every side's only as good as the last game. We didn't fix everything that we've been lamenting about with one very encouraging win. It's a step in the right direction, but it's no guarantee that you've gone off and addressed all your issues.
No, but it is a step in the right direction, as you
exactly
said. So, and kudos to everybody involved for having the courage to, I don't know if reinvent's the right word, because it's really reverting back to something that you were performing back in 2018.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
No, I just wanted to add, because I only just thought of it then, that we saw the footage when they came into the rooms after the game and how animated Buckley was. He was banging the rubbish bin lid or something as they were coming in. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, that's he's usually very stoic in the box. It was good to see some of the passion there. I thought that was a great move.
The best thing that I saw Buckley do, and he's done this a few times in the last few years, if you look at the best coaches like Clarkson, Malthouse during his time, Hardwick, they're all got Robbo in them. They've all got that Robbo mongrel in them. And Buckley, as a player, he was never like a sniper or anything, but he had that ruthlessness about the way he approached it. And I haven't seen that enough in his coaching. Probably one of the few times is when he accosted Jared Witts on the boundary and told him off in the game against Hawthorn years ago. And what I really loved, it's pretty much my highlight of the performance, was fucking when Basil Zempilas brought up the 2018 grand final and Buckley just shot him down. And, and you could see, like, afterwards when they went back to the commentary team, they commented on that. Like, they go, when you see Buckley's eyes narrow just that little bit, not to pursue that. And he did that a few times in press conference. I remember a few years ago when we were 0-2 or something, and at the press conference, one of the journalists said, it's the season over, and Buckley goes, "He's up, mate. 0-2." And you could just see that ruthlessness come out. And I want to see that more in terms of the way we play. I mean, West Coast got to give them credit. They're a very Robbo team in the way they approach. You look at that Liam Ryan, the way, he flaunted it at Braden Maynard. I want to see that more in our side. You can see it with a few players. We've talked about this with Greenwood and Adams. But I want to see more of that in our on-field demeanour. I want to have a sense of intimidation and ruthlessness and just playing on that edge, which I don't think a Collingwood side has had since about 1990.
No. And if they want to get used to losing, they can not take our advice. But I want to see a lot of Robbo out there.
Well, why won't you take our advice? We've been spot on with everything for about the last 18 months. We should be running the club. In fact, Eddie, if you're going to just maybe, just step down and give me the presidency without an election or anything, I'm happy to take it on.
Yeah. Just get him to have his people call our people. Do we have people? Do we? We got an email address. That'll do.
Do we have one?
No.
Reach us on social media. That's where all the professional work's done.
Hmm.
That's where all the contracts are signed in Facebook Messenger.
That's it.
Anyway, that's it from us. Great to have a win.
Yep.
And hopefully you hear more of this enthusiasm
Yes.
next week.
All right. Go Woods.
Make it so. Later.
See ya.